All right, welcome to the briefing, Sierra Club Pennsylvania's series of live legislative updates. My name is Melissa. I'm the senior distributed organizer for the Pennsylvania chapter, and I facilitate the tech for this series. And then you're going to hear mostly from Jen Quinn, our legislative and political director, and we're also joined by Nate Regal, our clean energy program advocate. So if you haven't joined us before, these are 30-minute updates about what's happening in Harrisburg, and we do occasionally pepper in some updates from the federal level when there are actions that you can take. We do have closed captioning running, but if you are only listening on the phone, I do advise that we have a slide deck. We do our best to read off everything that's on the slide deck, but if we do miss anything, you will get all of these resources in your email tomorrow. We also have our briefing digest, which is I'm going to go put in the chat there. This is a running document that updates with the link to this current session slide deck. It will have the recording link on there. Any action items we highlight or links to upcoming events, that all goes into the digest. If you were with us during the past legislative session, you'll note that the digest is now blank. That is because we have archived the past years so that there is no confusion with bill numbers, if things are reintroduced, etc. If you do want any of that content, just let me know and we can go back and pull some of what's in the archive. But we are starting 2025 fresh with a relatively fresh briefing digest for today. Today is a single session. We are not doing weekly ones yet, so we will return to having weekly briefings when there is more content to deliver. So please just continue to stay tuned to your emails for updates about our briefing schedule. I think that is everything from me. I've probably forgotten something since this is our first one from 25, but please ask questions if anything is unclear. I am going to screen share and hand it over to Jen.
Great. Thank you, Melissa, and welcome everyone. Thank you for rejoining us or joining us for the first time if you haven't previously after our 3-month hiatus with the legislature recessing for the new session. Next slide, please. And it is a beautiful day, so thank you for taking 30 minutes to come and spend some time with us and hear what's happening in Harrisburg. So things are off to a really slow start. That is not atypical for a new session, right? New session began January of this year. It will expire December next year. So all the bills that are introduced now, they'll be in play for the next 2 years. It's also been a slow start because there was an election. We have new members, new committee chairs, new committees, those assignments. All the bills, the ideas need to be sent off to the Legislative Reference Bureau where they're put in that format that we're all familiar with. That takes a long time. So lots of reasons why things are off to a slow start. The main reasons, the Senate is down one Republican member. Representative Ament resigned to go work for Senator McCormick. And then the biggest reason, there was actually a death of a member in Allegheny County, a Democrat. So that razor-thin majority is now a tie, 101 Democrats to 101 Republicans. And so nothing will happen until after the special election on March 25th. And even then, we're not anticipating a whole lot happening before budget activities sort of get into full swing late May and June. Next slide, please. So as I mentioned, budget. If you have been paying attention, the past 4 weeks or so have been nothing but budget hearings. Most relevant to us, the House grilling Cindy Dunn and Jessica Shirley, DCNR and DEP Secretary and Acting Secretary. This link here is active. It's also in the notes. It's recorded. But if you didn't attend, you can watch. And nothing too exciting, same old talking points there. And then again, the Senate appropriations doing the same with Pennsylvania DEP. And I will note that Acting Secretary Shirley is in the running now to officially becoming secretary. She will be up for confirmation by the Senate. It's been a long, I think, roughly 2 years where she's been acting secretary. So folks were waiting for some of the, I think, turmoil from Reggie to sort of die down before moving forward with that Senate confirmation. Next slide, please. And then some other news, we do have some new House committees. Intergovernmental Affairs is a new committee mirroring an already existing Senate committee. Communications and Technology is a brand new committee. And then one of the committees that folks who have attended these previously are probably really familiar with, a committee we work with all the time, Environmental Resources and Energy, has now become Environmental and Natural Resources Protection. That's still chaired by Representative Vitale. And that energy piece has been sort of cleaved off and has now become its own committee. The Energy Committee, chaired by Representative Fiedler. I imagine a lot of our work will also go to the Energy Committee. So I wanted to flag that for folks, these sort of changes in the structure of how we do things and where some of the meetings and bills will be headed. Next slide, please. So our legislative tracker, this link is live. It will also be in the notes, but if you can also visit PA Sierra Club's website under our work and then legislation. I think there are about 50 bills in there right now. All of the bills in there and the bills I put on the slide, they're just a sample of what's been introduced, but they should be familiar to folks. We're seeing mostly reintroductions of everything we saw last session, not really a surprise. So we saw HB 84 reintroduced, prohibiting the spreading of brine, oil and gas wastewater on roads and land. HB 673, 100-foot buffers along our waterways. Senate Bill 349, decommissioning and bonding requirements for solar projects. So nothing monumental here, just flagging for folks what's out there, what we're keeping an eye on, but please take some time to go visit our tracker to get a better idea of what's been introduced so far. And again, we usually end up tracking about 170 bills, so we're maybe a quarter of the way there, a little more than a quarter of the way. So the tracker will be updated over the remainder of the session. Next slide, please. And so we are waiting for the governor's energy plan. He has named it Lightning after Ben Franklin's experiments in the storm. Today, actually, the governor was in York to officially unveil the plan. We do not have bill language yet. Once we get that, possibly next week, we will do a deeper dive on this call of what the Lightning package entails, but I'll just give a brief overview of what we're expecting or what we know at this point. A big part of it, press. Folks are probably familiar with that from last session. That's updating our alternative energy portfolio standards, our current clean energy standards, if you will. And then PACER, also from last session. This is the Pennsylvania specific version of RGGI, which is a carbon cap and trade program. And then the new additions to the Lightning Plan are EDGE. And again, this isn't super new, but it's new as part of this package. EDGE was a tax credit from last session that had money for hydrogen, sustainable aviation fuel, semiconductors, milk for some reason. This time around, we're anticipating battery storage, which would be helpful for our issues in clean energy development. And then RESET, this is a siting board for solar and wind projects to help address some of the issues these projects are having when it comes to NIMBYism and local ordinances, local resistance to these projects. So this could help get more clean energy projects built in Pennsylvania. Act 129, if folks are familiar with that, it requires our electric companies invest in energy efficiency programs to reduce demand, something they generally dislike, but a program that's pretty old and needs to be revamped. So we're glad to see that as part of the package. And then community energy. This is a repackaging of community solar with the belief that changing the name can maybe change some attitudes. And it also includes methane digesters, if folks are familiar with that, where farmers would take their manure to a facility where it is burned and it produces electricity, and then also adding geothermal to this community energy to make it more palatable for Republicans. Now, again, co-sponsor memos were released today. We don't have bill language yet, but once we do, we will do a deeper dive on this call to really dig into, what's good and what's bad about this package. Next slide, please. And then past what has moved through the Senate thus far, we did see two bad bills make their way over to the House. Senate Bill 186. We saw this last session. Senator Yahd's bill to repeal Pennsylvania's involvement in the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative, which caps carbon emissions from electric generation. Not a surprise there. It did pass by a larger margin than when we expected, with 31 yes votes. Not expecting any action on that in the House at this point. And then again from Senator Yahd, we saw SB 187, which would establish an independent energy office. It doesn't sound like a bad thing, right? The question is, would it really be independent? DEP has an energy programs office that does a lot of similar work. So why do we need this, and how would it be politicized or manipulated? We always have to be concerned when certain folks are asking for certain things, because it can sort of be wrought with bad intentions. So this is something also in the House we're keeping an eye on. We know that they're looking at this as a possible trade. We're looking at ways that if it is a trade, we can make it less harmful, but again, not anticipating any movement on this as of yet, but wanted to flag for folks that this is really the only thing we've seen come out of the Senate, and nothing has really moved in the House. Next slide, please. And then I've mentioned RGGI, the Regional Greenhouse Gas Initiative. We did have an announcement that the Pennsylvania Supreme Court will hear oral arguments sometime this year. If folks recall, this has been at the state Supreme Court for a year or two at this point. They do not have to hear oral arguments. They could have decided the case without oral arguments. And then the decision, there is no real timeline. It could come later this year, next year, the year after, the year after. I was speaking to someone who said they would expect it to come after the election next year, so it would not interfere with Josh Shapiro's reelection chances. But again, I think that's cynicism in Harrisburg, but there could be some truth to that. So good to hear that they've scheduled oral arguments, but still no idea when there will actually be a decision. The next slide, please. And so speaking of the Supreme Court and the RGGI decision, I did want to flag for folks, there are 3 Democratic justices up for a retention vote. Most of the time, retention is something that is very quiet, very sleepy. It does not gain a whole lot of attention, but we do know that there is a concerted effort to flip the Supreme Court by having folks vote no when it comes to retention. If that happens, there's only been one justice who lost a retention vote. So there will be a lot of efforts put into making sure that the court remains as is. But this sort of goes into what I was talking about before, right? Is this retention vote why the RGGI decision is so delayed? Is there a reason to not have this decision prior to the retention races? The answer is probably yes. It's a pretty controversial decision, and there's a reason why that they would not want to do that before a retention vote. But I did want to flag for folks, and we will talk about this more as the year progresses, that the retention issue will be a much larger issue than it ever has been. The last call I was on, there's anticipating $30 million of Republican money going to be invested into flipping these seats, and that could, of course, increase as time goes on. So next slide, please. And then just flagging for folks, the Energy Committee will be meeting Monday, March 17th, and they will have a voting meeting on HB 362. If folks recall from last session, the PETA bill, the Pennsylvania Energy Development Authority, has the federal Solar for All money that could go to the Solar for Schools program, but it was held up in the fiscal code last year. So this would address that issue and free up that money. And then also House Bill 660. This was another bill from last session. It establishes water and energy standards for certain commercial and residential appliances. It passed the House last year. It's a good bill. Hopefully it'll pass the House again. But those are expecting to be voted on in committee. On Monday, I am expecting House Bill 362 to likely be part of the budget, just given that the problem with the Solar for All money was a line in the fiscal code, so it makes sense for this bill to be moved now. I'm not anticipating 660 getting a vote anytime soon, but you never know. But I do have a feeling they're teeing up HB 362 for a vote soon, so it can be put into the budget. Next slide, please. And then just a quick look at the session days, what we're anticipating over the next few months, roughly 6 days a month for the House and a little less for the Senate. And then things will ramp up again in June for budget when they're in session nearly every day. Next slide, please. And I did want to flag for folks, March 20th, as of now, is a Community Solar Day of Action. We don't have details yet. Our partners are working on this. As soon as we have more information, we'll put that in the briefing digest and probably some separate emails to some of our lists if you're on our clean energy team or Melissa's CAT team. We'll have more details there, but it's the equinox, and there will be in-person events in Harrisburg as well as virtual lobby meetings, calls, emails, just asking folks to do advocacy throughout the day on the 20th to show support for community solar in the legislature. And again, more details to come. And I think that might be my last slide, so I can turn it over to Melissa.
Yeah, thanks, Jen. So just one action alert here from the federal level. Obviously, there is a lot happening at the federal level, and this is not the space for us to go into everything. But we, as the Pennsylvania chapter, do have this action alert asking members of Congress to protect the clean energy investments in the Inflation Reduction Act. So you can see some of the details there, some links to more of the information. That link will be in the briefing digest. It's a real quick message to your folks in Congress, both senators and representatives. In the briefing digest, there is also a link to printable petition sheets if you wanted to go kind of do some in-person petition collection. We would love for you to do that. If you do end up doing that, please reach out to us so that we can get those petition signatures back from you. And then, yeah, there's some more information in the digest. But right now, our main federal action coming from the Pennsylvania chapter is to protect the Inflation Reduction Act clean energy funding. So take a look at that, and we appreciate your attention when there is so much going on. I know there's so much going on. And then if you are interested in both state and federal advocacy, if you want to get action alerts like this on a regular basis, if you want to tap into what you can do every week, that's not a big time investment, but makes a difference, we encourage you to sign up for our chapter advocacy team. We do meet virtually on the first Thursday of every month, but it's not a requirement to attend those meetings. We have an email that goes out every 2 weeks with a clear list of action items that you can take. We also run a lot of our training through the chapter advocacy team. There is also a link to our volunteer interest form on this slide and in the digest as well. And I think that is actually the conclusion of that is the end of the slide deck. So I'm going to go ahead and stop sharing, and then we can turn to our questions. We did have some come in through the chat first, so we'll do that first. And then if folks want to raise their hands, we will do that after. So the first question was, do we know what the polls are indicating for the House race?
As of now, it looks like a safe Democratic seat, so it should remain 102, 101 after the special election. No alarm bells ringing as of yet in that race.
And then the next question is, who participates in the retention vote?
So the retention vote will be part of the ballot in November. So it'll have the names of the judges. I don't think there's any party affiliation, and then a simple yes or no. So that is open to the voters in the Commonwealth.
And then our third question in the chat is, will Sierra Club Pennsylvania contribute to or be involved in Penn Future's Reggie appeal?
I believe we are interveners in that. We were part of the environmental organizations who intervened, saying that the Environmental Rights Amendment needs to be considered. So if you're referring to something else, Bill, let me know. But as of now, I'm pretty sure we're already interveners in the Reggie Supreme Court case.
All right, I see a hand from Robin.
I was curious if there's any sign that the whole home repairs funding will be something that included in the budget.
Depends on who you talk to. We know it was in the governor's budget. Senator Argyle, who is my senator, we have a lot of blight here. It's former coal country. We know that he has sort of taken up the mantle at this point, along with Senator Saval, to try to get Republican buy-in, but it's still a bargaining chip, very much so. So it just depends at this point. One, the fiscal analysis that's coming with it doesn't look too good, right? With the rainy day fund sort of dwindling and federal money not coming in, or questions of federal money coming in. So right now it's still a question mark. We're working on it. There's a coalition of folks working on it. Senator Saval's staff is, but at this point, it just depends on who you talk to. So we're working for that and hoping for it, but nothing definitive yet. And there won't be anything definitive until a few days before the budget, or hours before the budget is voted on. But thank you for the question. I'll keep folks posted as this evolves, but as of now, it's just a question mark.
Thanks.
And there's a question in the chat. How is the riparian buffer being defined?
So that's it's under Webster's bill. I haven't looked at it for a while. I think it's 100 feet along all waterways and then 300 feet along exceptional value and high quality waterways.
Do we have any other questions? Would anyone else have anything to ask?
Melissa, since there's time, can I ask, is that Tim? Do you have a question? No, okay. I was gonna ask about the Act 129 expansion. I'm just imagining that there might be community level organizations that would be particularly anxious to promote that, and will we be looking at how we can really broaden the tent on advocating for that? I mean, it just, there's such a pathetically small commitment on the part of the utilities.
Yeah, I mean, I think part of this is, figuring out what's going to move and what isn't, but then also, there's the importance of like educating and base building. And we know that Act 129 is tough, right? Like the utilities tend to not like it, but I do think there's a lot of room to educate folks and to sort of build bigger coalitions because it is really important and most folks don't understand it. If I had to bet on the lightning plan, I would say edge is priority number one and probably is it put in the budget. And then reset and community energy are probably most likely to move this session as of right now. Of course, things can change. But at this point, we just haven't seen, last session or this session, the governor really put a lot of effort into press or pacer or any of the other components. And again, that can change very quickly. But Act 129 is something that I think we can strategize around. And I know a lot of folks are happy to see that in there. We just need to figure out what we want to do and what the chances are of it moving.
Thanks.
Howard?
Hi. Can you talk a little bit about the Pennsylvania Energy Development Authority? How relevant is it now that a number of the federal programs are being recalled?
I mean, I'm gonna have Nate chime in because he knows much more than I do, but it's still relevant, right? They have or a portion of it, it's how the solar for all money is rolled out. I know it has to be spent, but it's still an organization that has been in existence since I think 1984. This is meant to modernize it so it can handle sort of new projects and dealing with the financing there. So I mean, in my opinion, it should still exist, right? Because the courts are deciding things every day and there's still money coming in and being turned off and coming back in again. But I want to see if Nate has anything more to say about this since he's a little more well-versed in PETA than I am. Sorry to put you on the spot, Nate.
Well, that's all right. That's why I'm here. So, PETA also they have multiple programs that are we'll say administered through PETA, and one that's coming to mind right now is the Pennsylvania MORE program, that municipal opportunities for retrofits and energy efficiency and all that kind of stuff. So there are more than just the solar for all, and what is already being implemented is still moving forward. As far as I know, everything seems to be moving forward. And as Jen said, it's we'll say it's legislative, through the state. So even if federal funding were to completely disappear, PETA would still be there. But then you brought up how relevant would it be? There are also I don't know how to. There's the condition that they're the state energy office, the energy programs office is the state energy office, and PETA is now it qualifies as we'll say the lending organization that can receive assistance through through the federal government. So even without funding, though, there are still federal programs that PETA can participate in. So it's still functioning, maybe just not as much as we wish it was.
is it mostly for the purpose of channeling federal funds to state and local recipients, or does it have other functions?
And it could be any funds. When you look at the and I'm stretching my memory here. When you look at the the enabling legislation for PETA, I think it has in there that to try to bring in federal funds, and it has a whole list of other types of funds, so they can rely on other funding sources if available, if my memory serves me correctly.
Thank you.
We've got a question in the chat that Jen answered, but I'll read it for the group. Is EDGE for green hydrogen or any hydrogen? Jen answered, I'm pretty sure it's for blue and or green hydrogen. We haven't seen the new language yet. And then we have a hand raised from Bill.
Hi, Melissa. Jen, do we believe that a community solar bill will be introduced? And is the community energy proposal by the governor a conflict with that, or trying to, whatever call, push it out of the way? I mean, are we going to be able to push community solar forward?
I doubt that a separate community solar bill will be introduced. So Representative Schweier, who was the prime sponsor for community solar last session, is the prime sponsor for community energy. This session, the language should be identical or nearly identical, with the additions I mentioned for methane digesters and geothermal. So I don't think community solar will be a separate issue. They've added these things for purely political reasons to get Republican support. I don't know if it will be enough to get Senate Republicans to support it, but I'm very doubtful community solar would be a separate bill. And if it is a separate bill, I don't think anyone would really push it.
So, okay, so if it's being watered down just a little, but at least as far as you can tell, the solar provisions of it will be as strong as it was in the prior iteration?
It should be, the language should be identical or nearly identical to what it was last session.
Great, thank you.
All right, so we are coming up on time in our last minute. Do we have any final questions?
I asked about the buffer, how the buffer's being defined. It says 100 feet, but they're not going to try to say that's 50 feet on each side, right? The corridor should be a riparian 100 feet from the stream.
Yeah, I'm pretty sure
that-
it's
well, let's be
100
sure.
feet in both directions. I haven't read the bill recently.
Right.
but
Okay, I'd like to be sure about that. Thank you. Okay.
yeah, the bill number is in the slides.
Yes,
and
I saw the number, but I forget it. 600 something, I think.
Howard?
Yeah, one last question. Is it ever possible to get Republicans in the Senate to vote for any environmental legislation? And I know it's a general question, but I'm wondering if there's any wiggle room there, and also, well, primarily in the Senate.
It's really tough, Howard. The margin is big. It's what, 28 to 22. They don't need to vote for anything they don't want to. So yeah, the question is what is the deal? What can House Democratic leadership offer them? What can the governor offer them to make a deal? And folks have to be willing to sort of compromise on both sides. I don't know what that would look like. There's only a handful of people that are privy to those discussions, and as of now, it hasn't really gone well for anyone, considering we got so little done last session.
Thanks.
Bill, is that a new hand from you or was that from before? Okay, not hearing Bill. I think it's an old hand. Okay. All right, so we are at time.
I can follow up on the riparian buffer if there's a second. It is 100 feet on each side, and then 300 feet on each side for the higher quality.
Thank you, Nate.
Always good for our live research and fact checking. So thanks, Nate. All right, folks, we will wrap then. You will get the recording, slide deck, etc. In your email tomorrow. And then just pay attention for our announcement for whenever we are returning the briefing. Like I said, don't come back next week. We will let you know when our next session is. So with that, go enjoy some sunshine.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Bye.
Take care.